Welcome to our weekly Church on the Rock podcast. For more information, visit us at churchak.org, download our Church on the Rock AK app, or like us on our Facebook page. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy our weekly podcast.
How you doing, church? I often forget that there are people watching online, but I got a text from a friend in between the services, and they were watching from San Diego. I just said, I hate you. No, we're glad you're joining us online. I'm super glad you're in the room because I can see you, and that's super helpful for me. We're in a series right now called Dangerous Dreamers. And last week, we were looking at the book of Ezekiel, and we spent a whole one Sunday in the book of Ezekiel. And then this week, we're going to spend a whole one Sunday in the book of Daniel. I don't know whose idea it was to only spend one Sunday in each of these massive and extraordinary books, but they should be fired. It's me. It was my fault. Now I'm looking at it, I'm like, nope, we're going to have to come back and hit these again because they're so full of content. But there are a couple things I want to remind us of. One is this. When you look at the scriptures and you're reading the stories, the narratives that are contained in there, there's a real temptation to read them as though they were about the individuals described in the stories. And so they call it a hero hermeneutic. You're looking through the Bible and you're like, who are the heroes in the story? And so David's a hero. Goliath is not a hero, right? You look through the stories and you're like, who are the heroes? But here's what you need to understand. In the Bible, there's only one hero, right? God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And when you read the scriptures, what you're actually discovering are things about God. If you believe that David is the hero somehow, well, there's sometimes he's not so hero-like. Right? When the scriptures say that David was a man after God's own heart, it doesn't mean he was a man who had a heart just like God's. It means he was a man who was in pursuit of the heart of God. And sometimes that showed up in his willingness to repent immediately. And sometimes it showed up in his willingness to make the right decision in the moment. But the story isn't about David. The story is about God. And to the degree that you read the scriptures and you're asking this fundamental question, what is being revealed about the character and nature of God, how he relates to us, and how we should relate to him, is the degree to which you will get God's intended meaning out of the scriptures. Now, the reason I bring this up is the book of Daniel is a popular book of stories. If you grew up in church world, maybe you went to Sunday school. Anybody know what Sunday school is? Oh, good. That's more of you than, had angels on your Christmas tree, so hey, that's a win. But Sunday school was just like it sounds. It was on Sundays, and it was like going to school. You went to a class before the church service, so you got two church services. Wouldn't that be awesome? So you went to a class, and then you went, and one of the most popular stories, maybe two of the most popular stories in Sunday school were Daniel and the lion's den, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and the fiery furnace. This is going to push it back even further. Anybody remember flannel graphs? Oh, there are some old people in the room. Or felt boards, right? Yes. Depending on what part of the country you grew up in. Flannel graph is the proper term, just in case you're wondering, because that was from the South. But there were these felt boards. In fact, I made one a few years ago for a Christmas message that I did. It was a massive flannel board. And then you had the characters, and you put felt on the back of them, and then you'd stick them up there and tell the stories, right? Daniel and the Lion's Den was a popular one, for sure. Now, here's the thing. The reason I bring that up is because often the most popular stories are easy to miss the point in. You get caught up and he was thrown into a lion's den. He was rescued from a lion's den. And sometimes the story can be so familiar that you actually miss the more nuanced or detailed things that are in there that tell you something about God and about how we relate to God. So we're going to take a look at two of these stories in the book of Daniel today. My title today is Flames, the Furnace and the Fangs, Faith and Favor. And so I want to bring us up to speed in the book of Daniel. And I mentioned this last week, but currently in the nation of Israel, at this period of time, there are three prophets who are speaking to the nation. One of them is Ezekiel that we looked at last week. And Ezekiel's assignment is to speak to those who have been taken by Nebuchadnezzar, by Babylon, into captivity. And these are the wealthy, the elite, the rulers of the day. They would always take them out of the nation first so that a coup wouldn't arise back in the country they had conquered. And they would bring them into their land. And Ezekiel's writing to those who have been taken into exile and are now being held captive in a foreign land. Jeremiah is speaking to those who are left back in Jerusalem, who are mourning the fact that they have been conquered by a foreign and pagan nation. And they are mourning the fact that the temple has been destroyed, and they're wondering, is there any hope left? Will God ever restore things? And Jeremiah is referred to as the weeping prophet. And Jeremiah is speaking to those who are left back in Jerusalem, the remnant who are still in the land. And then there's Daniel. And Daniel isn't actually directly speaking to Israel at all. Daniel's actually charged with speaking to the courts of Babylon. And not just Babylon, Daniel will actually be a prophet to 4 different rulers that will successively rule in this land. He'll be in the kingdom of Babylon. He'll be in the kingdom of the Persians. He'll be in the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. He'll actually be in a position of authority and influence and power through multiple rulers in a foreign land. Now, to bring us up to speed, they've been taken into exile. This is chapter 1 in the book of Daniel. And then the conditions of survival and servitude in that land are something you would not want to experience. It's hard to really wrap your head around the brutality of conquering kingdoms in this period of time. In fact, when they would conquer a kingdom, they would take all of the wealthy and the prominent and the rulers of the day, they would take their children and they would turn them into servants in their own kingdom. In fact, we're told that Daniel reports directly to the chief of the eunuchs. So do 3 other friends of Daniel's, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or if you watched Veggie Tales, Rack, Shack, and Benny. And here's the thing. Typically, in this scenario, eunuchs are reporting to the chief of the eunuchs. You can explain that later to whoever you need to. But they were very deliberate in making sure that family line was ended. And then they were going to educate them and train them and prepare them in all the ways of the Babylonian Empire. In fact, they changed their names. Their names were not originally Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Daniel is often referred to as Belteshazzar in the book of Daniel. They took their Jewish names and they turned them into the names of Babylonian pagan gods. They were doing everything they could to indoctrinate them into the ways of the Babylonians, thus hoping that they would assimilate into Babylonian culture. And the thing is that these young men actually rise to prominence inside of Babylon. Early on, there's a test of their faith, and you need to understand that in this particular test, the king was giving all of the best food and the best wine for these young men who were being trained up to serve in his kingdom. He was giving the best of the best food to them, but there was a problem with it. It had been offered to idols before it was offered to them, and these Jewish young men said, "We cannot eat food that has been offered to idols." And so they had to settle for something far worse than what the king was offering, which was meat and wine, and they had to settle for vegetables. They said, feed us only these vegetables that we're eating. And after 10 days, if we don't seem like we're in better health than all of the other men, then you can bring us back into alignment and we will eat the meat. And yet God performed something miraculous and they are doing far better than all the others. It was a test of their faith, though, and their faithfulness. And then there's the king's dream. Nebuchadnezzar, in the middle of the night, has a dream that's very disturbing to him. It's a dream of a statue. A massive statue. And the statue has a head that's of gold, and it has chest and shoulders of bronze, and then a waist and thighs of silver, and then a clay legs and feet at the bottom. And he doesn't know what the dream means. He just knows it's disturbing. There's an element of the dream. Something comes and smashes the feet, and the whole thing collapses. And so he wants his magicians and his sorcerers and his wise men to come and tell him about the dream, but he doesn't want to tell them what the dream is. He's going to test them. I want to know if you can know the dream and tell me the interpretation of the dream. Well, they're all terrified because they're just charlatans. They're just making up answers is what they're doing. They're actually saying whatever they believe will promote them inside of this kingdom, and he's on to them. And he's about giving up hope, and one of the individuals in his court says, there's a man named Daniel. And he has the ability to know dreams and visions. And so Daniel comes. He tells him not only what his dream was, but then he tells him the interpretation of the dream as well. And this is what he says. The head of gold on the statue represents you, O king. It represents the nation of Babylon. And the chest and the arms and then the belly and thighs and the legs. He gives them each of the kingdoms that are going to come after the Babylonian kingdom. The next kingdom that's going to rule. He prophesies these successions of kingdoms, and we discover later that he's absolutely right in his interpretation of the dream. The king is so grateful that Daniel both has the ability to see into the spirit and he has the ability to give him the interpretation. He begins to promote Daniel to places of prominence and places of power. In fact, he says, whoever this God is the God we should all be worshiping. The whole land needs to know this. And then this is what happens in chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar builds a statue, a massive statue. In fact, it's the statue he saw in the dream, except he doesn't make it of different elements. He makes the whole statue of gold. The head that was of gold represented the Babylonian kingdom, and Nebuchadnezzar's like, got it. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a statue. And my kingdom, what he's declaring in a subtle manner is, my kingdom is actually going to last forever. It is going to be the only kingdom. It's going to be an eternal kingdom. And then he sets that statue up and he says, I want all of my rulers and my leaders to come and worship the golden statue. It is not a small statue. It is 90 feet tall. Yeah, that's almost as tall as Shaq. No, it's massive. So here's what happens. Daniel chapter 3, verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messengers to the high officers, officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provincial officials to come to the dedication of the statue he had set up. So all these officials came and stood before the statue King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald shouted, people of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, I told Jonas, I want a zither in our worship set next week. I have no idea what it is, but it sounds awesome. Lyre and harp and pipes and other musical instruments, bow to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. All right, everybody, gather around. Here's what we're going to do. Nebuchadnezzar has set up a statue. He's declaring his kingdom. His kingdom is going to be an eternal kingdom. And what you're going to do is, as soon as the music starts playing, you are going to put your face in the dirt and worship before the statue. 3 Jewish young men. We don't know exactly where Daniel is at this time. What we do know, based on Daniel's character, is that Daniel would have been one of the 3, but most likely he's out in some other part of the kingdom at this time doing the duties that he's been assigned. But 3 young Jewish men are there, and when the music starts, they don't bow down. I've often thought about this picture and how stark of a contrast it would be in this scenario. Like everyone is eating dirt, and 3 guys are just standing there. They aren't picketing. They didn't make signs and bring them out like, don't worship the statue. Like, they're just standing firm. Some of the other leaders go to Nebuchadnezzar and they're like, you're not going to believe this, but 3 Jewish young men refuse to bow down to your statue. And so Nebuchadnezzar is enraged. In fact, it says his face was distorted. He was so angry. Maybe you've seen your parent like that before. No, my daughter raised her. Anyways, here's what you need to know. These 3 young men are just standing while everyone else is doing what you asked. Nebuchadnezzar is enraged, but he's going to give them another chance. He likes these young men. He says, listen, Rack, Shack, and Benny, I'm going to give you another chance to do the right thing. It's kind of like as a parent, I'm going to count to 3. 1, 1.5, 2, right? Says, I'm going to count to 3. We're going to play music again, and then I'll give you another chance to bow down, and we'll be all good. And it's absolutely astonishing, their response to him. This is what they say. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need you to count to 3. We do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." Here's what's interesting. They aren't dishonoring Nebuchadnezzar. They're like, your majesty, you just need to understand, we're not going to do this. You give us as many chances as you want to give us. It's going to be the same outcome every single time. We don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste our time. We can just tell you right now that if the music plays again, we're still not going to bow. They don't say, listen, you buffoon. Ain't never going to happen. What are you thinking, you idiot? They're your majesty. They're honoring towards him. They show respect towards him. And they also in the same moment declare, and we're not going to do this. Cannot do this. Nebuchadnezzar is furious about this. But I want to give you this principle. Faith need not feel threatened in the face of possible failure. Hey, listen, our God, the one we serve, the living God, he could rescue us from the consequences, from the things that are coming. But even if he doesn't, we still would never serve your gods. Fundamentally, we believe he is the only living God. He is an eternal God. And so even if we died in this moment, we would still live forever with him. And I think often for us, when we are praying for something, we're asking God for something, we're hoping for the miraculous, that often we can feel like the possibility of failure can derail or deter our faith. And so I would say this, principle number 2, we should pray with great confidence and praise with eternal assurance. I don't know why. I think often out of fear of failure, fear that God won't answer in the way we would like God to answer, we can often sort of steer our prayers towards this kind of and God, if you would see fit, and by some wild chance, if you were interested in, I would really like for you to do this, but I'm not going to hold it against you. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But I'm just kind of sort of asking a little bit, if you like just ask him for what you're asking for. And trust and worship whatever the outcomes are. That those things don't have to be at odds with one another. That you could pray and ask with great confidence as long as you continue to praise with the eternal assurance that all things will be made new. If it doesn't happen right here, right now, I know it happens over there forever, which is way better anyway. That I could pray with great confidence, but I could also continue to praise with an eternal assurance. You were made for more than these moments. So they tied them up, and they threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king in his anger had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. I've often thought about this, like at which moment did they know they weren't on fire? Right? He's got some of his strongest soldiers, they're tossing them in and they're lit up. Like they burst into flames as you've been close enough to a really hot fire like that, right? Like I think my face just got burned just by standing 10 feet away. In this moment, the men who are throwing them in are killed as a result. I've often wondered, like at which moment does it dawn on them, like, we're not burning. Your hair's not on fire. And I know how much hairspray you used. Like what's going on here? Like we aren't in, and more specifically, that was an 80s joke, and just kidding. More specifically, like, they're not in pain. I don't know at what moment it dawned on them, but at some moment it has to dawn on them, like, something changed, like something's different, something's not right in this moment. And then Nebuchadnezzar looks into the furnace. But suddenly Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, we certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god." Didn't we throw 3 guys in? We did, for sure. I'm certain of it. There's a 4th guy in there, and that's not even the craziest thing. They are unharmed. Like, I don't know, it's so interesting, the detail that's put in here. Like, they're just milling around. I'd be thinking I'd just walk out. But they're hanging out with God. And it doesn't tell us which miracle happened first, but they're not bound anymore. Did the flames burn their bonds away? Or did like Jesus show up in there and he's like, "Here, let me get that for you. Like, let's just walk and talk for a little bit before you head out." Like, they come out of the furnace. I mean, if you could imagine the scene, we don't know exactly what it looked like, but I think a pizza oven seems like a great, imagery. Like, put them in a little thing and slide them in. And now they're in there, and Nebuchadnezzar's looking in, and he can see them just milling around, chatting it up with some mysterious 4th figure, and they're not bound. They come out of the furnace. Their clothes don't even smell like smoke. Like, this is a crazy cool. How many of you would like to have this kind of miracle in your life today? Like, I don't know, but I would love that. Or at least I think I would. Here's the principle. The power of the miracle actually must be preceded by the need for a miracle. And none of us really want to be in need of a miracle. Like, I think about some in this room that I know of right now who have been praying for a miracle. We all want to experience the miracles, but actually the experience of the miraculous, of the supernatural, is actually preceded by being in a position of needing a miracle. And we don't like to be in that position. And yet it's a prerequisite to experiencing God move in our lives in these kinds of ways. Now, Daniel is going to survive through several kingdoms, as I mentioned. And by the time we get to chapter 6, Daniel is going to be brought into a position of authority under a new king and a new nation. And here's the interesting thing. In their day, Each new kingdom that took over did away with all of the royal court of the previous kingdom. They did not want individuals. It's sort of like politics today, right? The new president doesn't come in and say, man, I like all of that guy's people. I think I'll keep them around. In their day, though, they just killed them. And they were all gone. But Daniel somehow survives through successive. His value is so important that they recognize there's something unique about this man. I want him to be a part of my kingdom as well. And Daniel is now serving under a king named Darius. Darius is known as the king of the Medes and the Persians. And Daniel is going to be serving under him. He's going to be promoted to positions of authority and power above all of his peers. So here's what we're told in Daniel chapter 6, verses 2 through 3. King Darius chose Daniel and 2 others as administrators to supervise the high officers and protect the king's interest. Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. Like, we're talking the ruling kingdom of the known world at the time. These guys have thumped the Egyptians, and you think about how much you hear about the Egyptians, right? They're ruling the known world at the time. And Daniel's value becomes so great that he's going to put him over the affairs of the entire kingdom. It's pretty wild when you think about it. A foreigner who's been brought into this land, who served the king before you, served the empire before you, and now you're going to promote him. I don't know if you've heard the saying before, but you have to be really careful because when you succeed at one level, people want to promote you to the next level, and so you have to be careful that you're not promoted beyond your competency, which I've often thought in the role I'm in now, it's within reason I may have been promoted beyond my competency. Like when you succeed here, people think you can succeed here, and yet what happens with Daniel is he actually can. In each and every new role and new season, he thrives in that place. Here's my observation. Faithfulness in smaller things often brings great honor in bigger things. But here's the second part of it. With great honor comes authority, and with authority often comes jealousy. I know lots of people who wish they had more authority, more power, more honor than maybe they currently do. And what I've discovered over the years is that's only because they haven't had it yet. It's just not as great as you think that it might be. Your motivations for wanting to have authority or to be in positions of power actually have to be very different motivations than self-satisfying, ego-driven motivations, or you will be sorely disappointed over and over again. But when people don't have it, they want it. And it creates jealousy, which is exactly what happens in Daniel's situation. The other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs, but they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. Let me be clear. The other politicians on the other side of the aisle couldn't find anything to criticize Daniel over. That's a miracle. Like, are you paying attention at all to politics? Our mayor was in the previous service. I was like, Glenda, think about it for a moment. They couldn't find anything to criticize him over. Like, you blow your nose the wrong way in our current political environment, and it's like a week of the news cycle that's going on. Like, did you see how he blew his nose? One nostril at a time. Like, who does that? Moron. They couldn't find, and how he handled the affairs of the government, they could find nothing to criticize him on. That's astonishing by itself. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. So they concluded, our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion. So they realized Daniel has certain religious practices, certain religious habits, religious rules, and if we could find fault in those areas or create fault in those areas, that's how we could trap Daniel. That's how we could get rid of Daniel. That's how we could get Daniel's power and Daniel's authority. And so if we can accuse him of something in relationship to his religious practices, we could undo his position and his power. What they have fundamentally misunderstood is that Daniel isn't actually motivated by the rules. He's motivated by the relationship with God that the boundaries afford him. And in their minds, most people, when they're pressed, if all they're doing is keeping the rules, then they'll just stop keeping the rules if there's no clear benefit to it for them. But Daniel's actually motivated by something very different. And so they go to King Darius and they say, "Yo, King, we have a brilliant idea." In fact, they do what people do all the time. They say, "Everybody agrees with this." Now, I'm pretty sure Daniel did not agree, but here it is. "We are all in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions." Like, it's just 30 days. It's just 1 month. And if you create this decree, what you'll discover is that people want to honor you and bless you and worship you just for 30 days. And if you would make this decree, make the consequences severe, people will give you the praise you're worthy of, King. And Darius is like, "I like it." So he does it. Here's what you need to know. There is clearly deep affection between Darius and Daniel. In fact, it goes both directions. Darius deeply loves the man that Daniel is and vice versa. Daniel has honor and respect for King Darius. And little does Darius know at this moment, but he has been entrapped. In fact, the laws of the Medes and the Persians, if the king undid the law that he made, he would actually be removed as king for doing so by their law. These officials know exactly that, and so they create this scenario. Here's the principle. Doing the right thing will not keep you from being accused of the wrong thing. Man, I always think it would. Like if I could just tell them why I did what I did, how good my heart is. What I've discovered over the years is that what a friend of mine told me a long time ago is true. More words don't fix things. That doing the right thing will not keep you from sometimes being accused of the wrong thing. And so Daniel does what Daniel's done every day since he came into captivity. Daniel 6:10. "But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with his windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God." He doesn't join a boycott. He doesn't join a picket. He doesn't hop on some social media campaign. He just does what he's always done. He didn't start doing it when he discovered something that he needed to be against, because he wasn't against it. He was for his relationship to God. And so when the moment came and the law had been signed and the consequences were clear, he just did what he had always been doing. I think often we think when that moment of pressing, when that moment of tension, when that moment to do the right thing presents itself in the face of adversity, I will just do the right thing. And I'm just telling you, you won't if you haven't. Faithfulness is built over time. It's woven into the habits that we develop in our relationship with God or anything else for that matter. Daniel is not resisting something. He's not taking up a fight. He's simply just doing what he's always done because it's who he is. In this moment, it shows up. It's the second principle. Doing the right thing will not keep you from having to suffer for doing it. Doing the right thing won't keep you from being accused of doing the wrong thing, and doing the right thing sometimes may be the very thing that brings suffering and pain and loss into our life. Over the years, I've watched numerous friends have to make really difficult decisions that have cost them their favorite job or their position or their relationships, and yet it was still the right thing to do, and they recognized, I will suffer some consequences for it. Daniel is not promoting rebellion. He is actually just pursuing righteousness. We refer to it as civil disobedience. Is there ever a time I should disobey the laws of the land? Is there ever a time that it's okay to go over the speed limit? I'm just kidding. We won't pick on that one, mostly for my sake. I think often we look at the world and we say, I think they're asking me to do this, and this is the time I'm going to stand up and tell them no, give it to the man. Like, here's what I'm going to do in this moment. And the reality is, he's not promoting anarchy. He's actually simply doing the thing that promotes righteousness in his own life. And here's how I would describe it. If obedience to civil law causes me to disobey God's word, I must obey God. There are lots of things that don't force me to disobey God. Christians love to make every single thing into an issue. And yet the reality is that there are moments, it's happened across our world over and over again, where I'm actually being asked to do something that is against God's explicit commands. I must obey God in those moments. Daniel does just that. They're waiting outside of his window. He opened it. They see him praying. They're like, got him. Here we go. They take a quick Polaroid. They run to King Darius. Just kidding. There were no Polaroids back then. I just wanted to see if you were still with me. And they tell Darius, here's what Daniel has done. And in that moment, Darius realizes, my good friend, this guy that I have a super high value for, the guy who's actually over the entire kingdom, has now been entrapped, and I'm complicit in it. And so he spends the day trying to figure out any way out of it, some loophole, some way that he could undo the very thing that he put into practice, and there is no way out. And so at the end of the day, Daniel chapter 6, verse 16, so at last the king gave orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, may your God, whom you serve faithfully, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, a little nod to another time when a stone's going to be rolled in front of a tomb, and Daniel is in the place of death. Darius is distraught. In fact, here's what we're told. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of his nobles so that no one could rescue Daniel. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment and could not sleep at all that night. There's one question rolling around in his head. Will Daniel's God save him? In an impossible situation, against all odds, will his God show up? So very early, the next morning, the king got up and hurried out to the lion's den. When he got there, he called out in anguish, Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God, whom you serve so faithfully, able to rescue you from the lions? Only thing he wants to know. In an impossible situation, for doing the right thing, is your God, whom you have faithfully served, has he been able to deliver you? And I thought about this over the years because I think that's actually the question that people that you know, people who are experiencing challenges right now, people who are watching you walk through difficult situations right now, they're actually asking this same question. Hey, is your God, whom you say that you serve faithfully, is that God able to deliver you from this situation, to bring rescue in this situation, to give you the ability to forgive in this situation? Can your God actually rescue you? Because I need to know, because I got some stuff going on in my life, and I want to know if there's actually a God who could bring deliverance. And they're shouting it out in anguish, wondering, has your God been able to deliver you? I've been wrestling with this because I think this is the core question for followers of Jesus that we should be able to answer for people around us. I'll give you three considerations. The first one is this. Do they even know who our God is? Why would they ask the question? What Darius knows, what everyone in the kingdom knows, is who Daniel's God is. It's actually a prerequisite to the question even being asked. It's something we don't like to let people know because we want everyone to be our friend. We don't want anyone to feel like they've been pushed to the outside or they're an outsider or I'm saying something that I'm not saying or I'm being exclusive or whatever all of the things are. And yet the reality is, unless they know who our God is, they would not connect the dots that he is the one who rescued us. The second thing that's true of Daniel, and this is the reason Darius asked the question, is that Daniel's been faithful to his God. Do we serve him faithfully? Not flawlessly, right? But faithfully. Would people look at my life and say, no, Jonathan loves Jesus? It's evident by the way he talks and by the way he interacts and by the things he gives his life away to. Like, no, I think he's been faithful. Sometimes faithfulness looks like repentance. Sometimes faithfulness looks like asking for forgiveness. And sometimes faithfulness looks like just doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But do they know who my God is? Do I serve him faithfully? And do we actually declare how he's delivered us in the past? Daniel had some stories to tell by the time he met Darius. You can rest assured that Daniel fundamentally believed that his God could do anything. I was thinking about Matthew chapter 5, Jesus preaching, known as the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus says this, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people put light, nor do people light, Matt, we're going to have to go with first service now. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." We live in a current Christian culture that has a really popular saying. It goes something like this, preach the gospel. If necessary, use words. But words are necessary. I've given this illustration before, but imagine that you've got a Boy Scout, right? And then you just got another young man who's standing there on the curb. The Boy Scout's wearing a uniform. The other young man is just not wearing a uniform. He just looks like the typical young man. There's an elderly lady there. She's old. She's probably like 55 or something. And just kidding, 51. She's struggling. She's clearly struggling. She's got her bags of groceries. She's at the light. She's waiting for it to change. But you can tell she's having a hard time. And the young man who is there just sees the woman, and he goes over and he grabs her bags of groceries, and he puts his arm out, and she puts her arm through his arm. The light changes, and then he just escorts her across the street. And you look at that young man, and you think to yourself, his parents raised him right. Like, that's a great young man. And now imagine the same scene, and there's a young man, and that young man's wearing his Boy Scout uniform. Weird, I know, but he's wearing it. People used to wear them all the time out in public. He's wearing his Boy Scout uniform, and the same scene, the old woman's there, and she's holding the bags of groceries, and he goes over and he grabs the bags of groceries, and he puts his arm out, and she puts her arm in his arm, and the light changes, and he leads her across the street, and you're looking at that scene, and you're thinking, man, the Boy Scouts are an amazing organization. Because you can identify who he's connected to. And to the degree that others can identify who you're connected to is the degree to which your Father in heaven gets the glory, not you. When we first got involved in foster care, my wife and I'll never forget Dylan Weiser. He was our guardian ad litem at the time, who was responsible. They're tasked with the mission of ensuring that the best interest of the child is seen through the whole process. And Dylan was up at our house. They come up for regular visits. And I'll never forget him sitting in our living room down in Homer and him saying to us, I just want you to know, down at OCS and in my office, we talk about the walkers all the time. You guys are just amazing people. You're our favorite foster family ever. And as I'm sitting there listening, like I hear the Lord so clearly communicate to me, you need to tell him why. So Dylan gets all done. I'm like, Dylan, you need to understand something. We aren't that great of people. But we've been adopted. God brought us into his family. It's by the spirit of adoption I get to call God Father. It just makes the most sense in the world to us that we would find ways to display that back to others. let your light, your testimony, your witness about who your Father is, so shine before people that when they see your good works, the glory goes to him, not you. That's actually the objective at the end of the day, and it's the question that Darius is asking of Daniel. Is your God? I know who he is. You've served him faithfully. Was he able to deliver you? And Daniel in this moment gets to respond with a resounding yes and sees a nation transform as a result. I have a friend who's a knife maker, but he didn't make this knife, I did. That's right. I'm a knife maker. In fact, he invites a group of guys over and we get to make a knife at his house, and he has all the equipment, all the materials. He has everything. You just pick out like the blade you want, the shape you want, and you go to work making the knife. He spends a lot more time with me personally than everyone else because apparently I need more help. But if you want to make a knife, I would never say to you, hey, come on over, I'll show you how to do it. At Landon's house, with Landon's equipment and Landon's help. Like the reality is that I'm not a knife maker, I just know one. And because of his influence in my life, because of his relationship to me, like my job would actually be to introduce you to the knife maker, not to convince you that I'm an extraordinary knife maker. Trust me, I'm not. Like, I think this knife looks pretty sweet. Like, I look at it and I'm like, nailed it. Not Landon. He looks at it and he's like, oh, you see that little bump right there and you see that right there? Like, I would never, ever sell this thing in my business. Like, this would ruin my reputation. I'm like, what? The reality is I'm not a great knife maker, but I know one. And what I want you to discover is that he wants to be involved in your life too. I want you to discover that he has the capacity to rescue me, to redeem me, to give me life again. I just want to introduce you to the one who can make something beautiful out of the messes we make. Amen? I want to invite you to stand with us. In John chapter 1, it's described in this way, the reason that John came into the world. John is the cousin of Jesus, actually. And in John chapter 1, John has an assignment. His assignment is to introduce people to the light. That's what it says, John chapter 1, verse 6. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. And Jesus' declaration about the role that we play as a light on a hill, a light in a house, intended to give light to everyone. Let the light of Christ, that they would know who's responsible for the people that we become. Let your light so shine so that when they see your good works, the glory goes to the right place. So Jesus, that's our prayer. Would you grant us a vision for something bigger than maybe the influence we think we have? To the degree that we join you in your mission is the degree to which we break out of the chaos cycle. We were not simply created just for relationship. We were created for mission, to re-enlist in the mission that you have, to join you in. And to the degree that we join you in what you're doing in the world, which is bringing glory to yourself, to the degree that we do that is the degree to which we enjoy the relationship you have made available to us. I pray that you would raise up a generation that gets back in the fight, that gives glory to you, and that does the right thing because it's the right thing to do. We look forward to what you're going to do in the days ahead. We say thank you for your faithfulness, for your grace, for your mercy. Thank you for showing us how to make knives, for being the master craftsman of souls. We just look to you. May we be able to answer the question of anyone who asks. Yes, my God, whom I serve faithfully, has been able to deliver me over and over again. In Jesus' name, amen. Our prayer ministry teams are in the corners on both sides here, and I just want you to know, if you need prayer today, that's why they're there. Give them the opportunity to join with you in prayer. Church, we love you. God bless you. Get out there and enjoy the day. Grace and peace to you.
Thank you for listening. For more of our podcasts and to discover how you can connect, visit us at churchak.org or download our Church on the Rock AK app from either iTunes or Google Play.